I moved to Orlando for work, and while my job was ready, I hadn't found a house to move into yet. I stayed at a short-term rental while I house hunted. I kept my stuff at a storage facility close to the rental so I could have quick and easy access to my stuff if I needed it. The place I chose was about 10 minutes from my rental and had 24-hour access, which was awesome because my job required me to work some overnights and there was no telling when my off times would be. I had some movers help me get my stuff into the storage unit, and one of them said he wanted to hurry because the building gave him the creeps. He said the building had quite a backstory. He leaned against my plastic-wrapped couch and took a long drink of water. He said the new owner bought the large building and renovated it for storage units. It was a former dance club, and in its time had a reputation for drugs and wild things happening. But that was years ago, and the building had remained empty until the recent owner had bought it to make this a storage facility. "You'd never know it unless you used the bathrooms," he said with a funny look. "They never updated them." He laughed and kept unloading the truck. The crew finished unloading and left. I stood in the hallway staring at my stuff. Now all I had to do was lock my unit and head out. It was 6:49 p.m. on a Saturday. The city was getting ready to party, and I was headed to bed. I was exhausted from the move and wanted to get back to the rental and relax. As I looked over my stuff, I picked a few items from the top boxes and realized that I needed to use the bathroom before I left. Plus, I was intrigued. How wild could this bathroom really look? As I walked to the far end of the building, the lights turned on, triggered by motion. The whole building was like this. I reached the far side of the building, and halfway up the corridor was the restroom sign. I walked down the hallway, aware of the sound of my own footsteps and the clicking on of the lights overhead as I walked. I reached the ladies' room and opened the door. Darkness. I couldn't see anything inside with the glare from the light behind me on the sinks. I put my arm up and waved my hand inside the door. The light buzzed on. The bathroom was long, with sinks lining one side and bathroom stalls on the opposite side. The paint on the walls was a dingy red-brown color, and the stall doors were painted black, with colorful polka dots. As I looked around, I thought, well, he wasn't wrong. This bathroom was definitely an afterthought and in need of a new paint job. If you didn't know the history of the place, it would be really surprising walking in here. Surprising and unsettling. The room felt heavy. It felt smaller than its dimensions. It was dingy, and as the black door closed behind me, I was no longer in a sterile-feeling, crisp, clean storage facility. Now I was in a small space heavy with memories. I wondered how many people had their best or worst nights within these walls. How many breakups, ODs, hookups, sloppy drunk moments had all happened right here. I picked a stall and closed the door behind me. I was just finishing when the lights flickered and I was left in total darkness. There wasn't a single sound in the room. My heart skipped a beat, but then I realized I must have been too slow for the motion sensors. I felt my way along the door and found the lock. I opened the door and the lights buzzed back on again. The motion of the door must have triggered the lights again. Well, that was creepy, I thought to myself as I washed my hands. I was reaching for a paper towel when I suddenly smelled cigarette smoke. I turned and saw that the first stall, the one closest to the exit, was now closed. I know every stall door in the bathroom was open when I walked in. For safety's sake, every woman should be aware of which stalls are open or closed when walking into a public bathroom, and I always check my surroundings. I couldn't see smoke, but the smell was definitely in the air. I rushed past the door, and as I did, the lights in the bathroom turned back off. I walked quickly back to my storage unit, the lights clicking on as I walked through the hallways towards my storage unit. That made me pause. The lights went out while I was moving towards the bathroom exit. I shook my head. The motion center must just be malfunctioning, I thought. I couldn't smell the cigarette smoke anymore, and my footsteps were the only ones I could hear. As far as I knew, I was the only one in the big building now. I pulled the roll door down and locked my storage unit. With my arms full of stuff, I headed towards the exit. My car was the only one in the parking lot now. Once inside my car, I could still smell the faint stink of a cigarette on my t-shirt. So I hadn't imagined it. I wondered how the person in the bathroom had stayed so quiet and still, not setting off the motion sensors. It freaked me out a little. I pushed it out of my mind and headed back to my temporary home to crash. I chalked it up to having too many things on my mind with the move. For the next few days, I had everything I needed to work and explore my new city. But that swimming pool at my rental was calling my name, and I knew my bathing suit was in a suitcase back at the storage unit. In the storage building. I had been meaning to look up that history of the old building and learn more about it. I googled the address, and up popped a series of headlines. Hit and run outside the Emerald. Another drug bust at the Emerald. Trafficking ring discovered at the Emerald. The Emerald Fire, unknown woman found deceased. I opened the link and read that story. At 3:20 a.m., long past closing time at the Emerald, fire was reported seen coming from the Emerald building. The fire started in the bar area and was believed to have been caused by an unattended cigarette. The fire then spread quickly to the exterior of the building and was reported by passers-by. Fire crews quickly arrived on the scene. Although the fire occurred after business hours, the building had not been empty. A woman was found deceased in the bathroom. Her identity and the reason for being in the building past closing time remain unknown. I reread the story a couple of times, sitting in shock. Did I have a ghost experience at that building that used to be the Emerald nightclub? I got shivers and closed my laptop. That can't be. There's no such thing as ghosts, I thought to myself. I shook it off and decided to get my bathing suit the next day. During the day, just in case. The next day, my boss called and asked me to come in late and stay late. I told her I could. That following day, I finished work at 8 and decided to stop into the storage unit to pick up my swimsuit. It would be a quick trip, in and out, and the next morning I could swim for the first time in many months. That's definitely worth the stop, I thought to myself. The storage unit's parking lot was to the rear of the building. I drove around back and thankfully saw another car there. The trunk was open, so whoever was there was between loads. I used my pass card and opened the door. I could see lights on towards the back of the building, and I could hear the voices of a man and a woman talking and moving boxes. Good, I'm not alone, I thought to myself. I unlocked my unit and rolled up the door. I was pretty sure my swimsuit was in a specific suitcase. If it wasn't there, I was going to have to open a few boxes. I found the suitcase and opened it. Of course, it wasn't there. It was full of other clothes, but my swimsuit was nowhere to be found. I started opening a couple of boxes, but no luck. One of the boxes had a soft corner and smelled strongly of my favorite gardenia perfume. I reached in and discovered my perfume bottle had broken and had spilled all over my clothes. Everything was soaked, and now I was covered in gardenia perfume. Oh no, I'm going to have to wash my hands. I turned towards the bathroom and started walking down the long hallway. The lights towards the back of the building were off now, and the building was quiet. Damn, I guess the couple left, I thought. I had really wanted to hurry so I could leave before they had. Being alone in this big old creepy building wasn't my idea of a good time. I reached the farthest side of the building where the bathrooms were located and took a deep breath. I pushed the door open. Darkness. I held my arm up into the dark bathroom and waved my hand. The lights buzzed on. The bathroom was empty. All the stall doors were open. I went to the sink and turned the water on, soaping up my hands, all the way to the elbows to try and get the strong smell off my skin. As I was scrubbing, the lights buzzed off. I stood leaning over the sink in disbelief for a second. I was washing my hands, so my movements should have kept the lights on. All I could hear was the water running in the darkness. I waved my arm around and hit something hot. As I pulled it back, I saw a bright flash of embers scatter in the mirror's reflection, and I screamed. I stumbled backwards and bumped into the sink. My motion must have activated the lights again, and they buzzed back on. I scanned around. The stall door behind me was closed. Is someone there? I asked. Silence. There was just the sound of the water running in the sink. I turned it off and got out of that bathroom. I walked fast towards my unit to lock up. I wanted to get the hell out of there. My skin on my finger hurt, the finger that had hit something hot in the bathroom. Had it been a cigarette? I stopped and looked down at it. There was absolutely a burn forming. When I looked back up, I realized the only lights on now were the ones I had just passed through. All the other lights in the building were off. My blood ran cold. I was alone in the building now. As I stood there, in the middle of the hallway, the lights behind me started turning off. With no motion, there's no lights. I had to move forward or I'd be in the dark. When I reached my storage unit, I rolled the door down and shoved the lock in place. I hurried towards the exit. I could see it just ahead. Behind me, I heard the lights turning on at the far end of the building. If they were turning on, someone or something was moving towards me. Every cell in my body was telling me to go. Just take those last few steps and leave. Don't look back. But I couldn't. I had to see. I stopped and slowly turned around. As my eyes scanned the hallway, I caught the last peak of a shape moving left, just past the edge of the hallway towards the bathrooms, and then I smelled cigarette smoke. What had I just seen? Was that the person from the bathroom? A wave of anger washed over me. That must have been the person that burned my hand and was now playing tricks. I started down the hallway to confront them. For a second, I thought maybe I should just call the cops and let them deal with it. But when I reached the end of the hallway, I could see the path lit before me, where they had just been walking. Just ahead, the bathroom door was closing. I followed. I don't really know what I was thinking, but it made me so mad that someone would do such a horrible thing and not even apologize. I reached the bathroom door and opened it, expecting to see someone right there. I was just a few steps behind them. The bathroom was dark, which meant there was no motion detected. What the hell? I thought. I reached my hand forward and waved it to turn the light on. At that moment, a black, charred hand clasped tightly around my arm and pulled hard. I lurched into the darkness and felt heat closing in all around me. "A life for a life," I heard an awful voice say. The news anchor stood in the shade with the sad, burnt building behind her. The fire at the storage facility in the former Emerald nightclub appears to have been started in the women's bathroom. Locals reported smelling smoke and called the fire department. When firefighters arrived, they found the body of a young woman who they believed was there after hours, accessing her storage unit. Although nothing was stolen, the police suspect arson. The woman has not yet been identified. With that, the camera stopped recording and the crew started breaking down the equipment. The cameraman stopped and saw a pretty woman standing nearby watching. She was petite, with bright purple hair and a short black dress. He wondered about her. She was cute, but didn't quite fit in. Her clothes were fancy for this early in the morning. As he packed up, he saw her light a cigarette. "Careful," he called out to her playfully. "The police think the person who set this fire was a smoker." He laughed easily, still packing his gear. He looked up, hoping she had laughed too. But she was gone. There was no sign of her. There were only a couple of people there now, but she had vanished into thin air. As he turned to pack the van, he smelled the sweet, strong smell of gardenias. If you enjoyed that story, I'm glad you found me. I tell creepy stories about scary encounters and paranormal events. If this is your thing too, stay, listen, and subscribe to Lady Grimm for more stories. It's okay to keep the lights on. Let me tell you another story. My friend Chris is a total adrenaline junkie. He loved being scared and going to haunted houses and things like that. So, of course, he wanted to try urban exploring. I was curious, but also pretty creeped out by the idea of going to a place that might be haunted, either by the dead or the living. Places like that could have shady people hanging around in them, so I was a little bit more reluctant. He finally talked me into it, saying he found the perfect place. Just on the edge of town, there was an old train building, long abandoned. It had once held grain coming and going on the no longer running train line. It was a series of long buildings and silos located just before the woods. There was a legend about a lady in a white dress that haunts the buildings. The story goes that this young woman was running away from home and had been hiding in one of the massive silos when it was filled with grain. She was buried by the grain and had suffocated. Supposedly, she still walks the buildings, and you can see her if you go exploring at night. Chris picked a Saturday night in October to up the creepiness factor, and we planned to drive out there at 10 p.m. I told Chris I was more worried about who might be living there than who died there. He smiled and said, "No worries, I have a flashlight, and I grabbed this from my dad's safe." He pulled out a gun and showed it to me. My heart was racing now. I didn't know how to use one, and I was pretty sure Chris didn't either. We pulled up to the old building, and it was just as creepy as you can imagine. We parked and found a door. It creaked open, and we slipped into the darkness. As we stepped into the building, we heard some skittering sounds. "It's probably rats," Chris said. I thought, oh, well, this isn't getting any better. We shined our flashlights around the room. It was huge and filthy. There was random trash on the floor, some scrap metal, and we saw some eye shine from rats in the corner. We walked around the room and saw a door in the rat corner. Chris headed in that direction, and the rats moved away fast. The door led to a hallway, and we could see some moonlight shining through the hole in the roof. There was water in the hallway, and our footsteps sloshed in the muck. We stopped to get our bearings and heard footsteps ahead, in the water. "There's someone here," I whispered, ready to run back the way we came. "It's just rats, it's okay," Chris said. He didn't sound so sure, and took off his backpack for me to hold. He reached into it and pulled out the gun. "What are you going to do, shoot them?" I asked. Shh, just in case," he said. We kept walking down the hallway and turned the corner into another big room. It was super dark and had no windows. We scanned the room, which was empty aside from a broken chair and some metal crates. We left that room and headed down the hallway again. I was starting to get a little bit more comfortable. It was actually kind of fun exploring this old building. Until we saw her. A dark-haired woman in a white dress crossed the hallway just ahead of us. We jumped back, then stopped in the middle of the hallway. We kept the flashlight on the very spot we saw her, but nothing happened. There was no noise, no footsteps, no sounds at all, not even the rats. "Come on, man, let's get out of here," I whispered to Chris. "No way, we barely saw her," he said. He kept walking down the hall, and I could feel my heart beating in my chest. All I wanted to do was turn around and run away, but I was too afraid to go alone. We reached the room where she had gone, and Chris shined his flashlight into the room. This one was a small room with a pile of wood pallets in a corner, but there was nobody in there. The woman we had just seen moments ago had vanished, just disappeared. The room had no second door, so the only explanation we could come up with was that we had just seen the ghost from the legend. Even though he kept moving down the hallway, I could tell Chris was freaked out. He was holding the gun and the flashlight out in front of him like they do in the movies. "You can't shoot a ghost," I whispered to Chris. "I know that. It just makes me feel better." There was a room ahead, and we stepped inside. It was another small room with trash, but this one had windows that had been painted over. So creepy. Chris started backing out of the room. I turned to follow and saw the shape of a woman standing just behind him. He was backing into her. I screamed, looking behind him, and he whipped around. There was nothing there now. Oh my God, we have to go. She was right there. I'm so scared. Let's get out of here. I felt like I was going to cry. I was so scared. She was not. She was just ahead of us, he said, his voice shaking. I know what I saw. Just a little more. We found a staircase leading up, and I agreed to check that floor, but then I really wanted to leave. I can't describe to you how creepy this building was. It was dark. It was wet. There were rats running around. We had both just seen a ghost that seemed now to be following us. All I wanted to do was leave at this point, but turning back alone was more scary than staying with Chris. This ghost could be anywhere now. We reached the top of the stairs and looked down the hallway. And there she was. We froze in place, too scared to move. She moved towards us slowly. Suddenly, she stopped and flung her arms out wide. We heard the most terrifying scream. Leave! That was it. We almost fell all over ourselves running away from her down the hall. We reached the end of the hallway and Chris turned to the left. There was a door there with a small window and we could see the moonlight. I can only assume he thought this was a way out of the building, maybe to a stairway or a balcony. He swung open the door and we ran through it. My feet expected floor and found none. We were dropping fast. The next thing I know, we hit the ground hard. I could hear Chris coughing next to me. He had had the wind knocked out of him, and I had landed with my hands out, and I was pretty sure my wrist was broken. I turned over and looked around. Above us, I could see the night sky, and all around us was a circular wall. We were inside a silo. We had fallen into a silo. When Chris caught his breath, he got up and tried to feel his way around. Both the flashlight and the gun were gone, probably somewhere just outside the walls. When our eyes adjusted, we saw that there was a ladder inside leading up to the top of the silo wall. Chris reached up, grabbed the bottom of the ladder, and started climbing. Hey, my wrist is hurt. I can't climb up that. Chris said, I'll climb out and get help. Before I had the chance to argue, Chris was over the edge of the silo. I heard him yell, I'll be right back. A minute later, I heard the car engine start and I heard him drive away. I was so terrified. I was having trouble controlling my breathing, and I was furious. How could he think that leaving me here was a good idea? This whole damn thing was his idea, and now I was stuck in here. Stuck in a silo in the pitch-black darkness, just feet away from what was a very haunted building. I pushed myself back against the wall so I could see every inch of it in front of me. I tried hard to adjust my eyes so I could see better. I couldn't hear anything at all, just the sounds of the night outside the silo. After about 10 minutes, but what really felt like hours, I heard leaves rustling outside the silo wall. I heard the movement stop just behind me through the wall. This wasn't Chris. I would have heard the car. After a couple of seconds, I heard a woman's voice. Now you can't leave either. I was so scared I started crying. I moved away from the wall, but there was nowhere to go. I tried controlling my breathing again so I could hear better. When I finally did, I heard the distant sound of a siren. I listened, hopefully. It was coming closer. A few minutes later, I could hear the sound of footsteps and people talking. A man's voice said, It's the fire department. We're going to cut a hole through the metal. Stand back. I've never been so grateful to hear a living person's voice, and never so happy to leave.